In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how one workflow can actually connect with other workflows to create a multi-threaded process so that you can really approach things like a human would. This is one of my favorite workflows that we use internally because it saves us countless hours every week, and it allows us to create really high quality content in a way that simply could not be done before with only human writers, strategists, and editors. So this is, in theory, our content brief generator. And we started by making a simple workflow that would create a content brief in the same way that we would do it by hand. So when I used to work in an agency, when we were handed a keyword, an SEO keyword, I would go through and I would do an internet search on Google. I would extract the top 5 URLs. I would take the first 3 URLs and research them. As you can see, I'm doing all of this in the workflow. I would scrape the results, analyze those results to look for content gaps. I create a report on those content gaps. I do some external research, and then I would go through and I would find all of our internal relevant links and sources. Now that's where you can see this run workflow inline action step. When you have this action, run workflow inline, you can choose a workflow and you can send the inputs over from the workflow that you're running. So for example, this connects to something called the pre-process workflow, and I'll pull that up for us here. And in the next video, I'll talk about the importance of having a pre-process and post-process workflow. It is essentially an internal link finder that can be used by the marketing team for injecting relevant and internal links. It can be used by the sales team so that it can find relevant links for their follow-up emails, for their ABM landing pages. It basically figures out what you are trying to generate and then what current links it needs to link to, so long as those are added in tables. So you can see here that this campaign brief is going to look at the keyword. It will then find blog posts by connecting to a table. It will find a product page by connecting to our product page table, find the right use cases, find the case studies, find stats from a benchmark report that was produced by the team. It will look through the podcast episodes and it will look through the transcripts to figure out which is the most relevant content we should link to for that piece of top of funnel content. It will then pull out a quote and it builds this report that we decided how it was structured. So you can see here, it is going to go through, find all, so this is the first input pulled there from that table. It will find the blog posts. It is instructed to find 10 URLs of relevant blog posts. It will then find the right product page, and that information was pulled here. It will then find the right use case, and so on and so forth. And then once this was built and we tested it and figured out, hey, this is finding the right links once it's given a keyword, we were then able to add this action, run workflow inline. And now we've got all of this research going into a SEO keyword. It is looking on Google and is actually searching that to see what comes up. We can look at the top 10 results, top 20 results, whatever we'd like. We can set it for the past month, past week, past 24 hours, whatever we'd like. And then it will extract the top 3 URLs from that. It will scrape each of those individually, just like I used to do. It will analyze those and build a content gaps report. It will use this special platinum action to research that keyword. And then it will run through and build an internal link report. With all of that information, you can see here, we've added those outputs into a content brief and instructed it with the research it needs, along with the internal link options that it should have. From there, once we've built enough faith in this workflow, just about 30 minutes or so of back and forth testing, we use that same action, and I renamed it here so you can see what it's called in our action library. We've added a second workflow to this. And again, we just run the workflow inline, and we can choose which of the workflows that exist there. And this sends it to our blog post writer. And it's almost like handing it off to a different human who's trained at a specific thing. So in a typical agency, you might have one person who's in charge of creating the content brief, and they would hand it off to the actual writer. The actual writer, we've gone through the exact same steps that a writer would do. Once it has the content brief as the input, which is what's getting passed along from this workflow, you can see run workflow inline, we chose the workflow, and then we added that content brief as the input. That gets kicked over here, and this runs through the same process that a human would look at. What is a good example of a blog post that we had in the past? Second example and third example, a great rule is the rule of threes. Make sure that you have 3 high quality examples for anything that you're trying to replicate. It will write the introduction based on how we liked those introductions in the past. And again, we can edit each of these steps to be as granular as we'd like. And we can also edit it with the LLM that we choose to do the writing. It will then write the core article with all of that same information, but including the introduction that it was just written so that there's no overlap. And then the conclusion. Same exact process. We just this time give it the introduction and the main article, and we instruct it with certain things we like. For example, we don't want the M dash in there. That's one of those things that people call out as AI slop. So we instructed it not to add that, told it what it's good at doing. It's great at writing compelling conclusions. And then we've given it these examples after it was analyzed so that it can follow the conclusions in those. Gives the full article, title, and metaslug. Creates a separate workflow for an FAQ. So this is the blog post content, and it will create an FAQ. And then it spits all of that back out into this original workflow so that we have the full blog post in rich text, the title, the meta description, and URL slug. When I was at Copy AI, we were using Webflow when we were able to just pipe this directly over into the CMS. We are currently with WordPress, and it is the same thing with Zapier or Zapier. We are able to send all of these outputs, if they are here as a separate step, into any field in our CMS. You'll also notice that in our blog post workflow, we have something called the post-processing workflow. And in this, pull this up for us. This serves as our internal editor, and it would be like handing it off from content brief creator to blog post writer to the editor. And what the editor will do is take that content piece. Again, it's all wrapped up into this fullcast blog post writer workflow. It will edit it against our editorial guidelines, which were loaded into Infobase. Edit it against our style guidelines. It will then edit it against our voice guidelines. Here. It will annotate the changes once. Then it will act like a colleague. And it's instructed to double check that work. And instead of rewriting the whole thing like you would get with a chat tool where you say, hey, rewrite this for me to make sure it's in the brand voice, it makes annotated changes all along the way. And then it sends it back to the blog post writer for the final, which gets sent back here. And as you can see in the table view, we have a log of all of the keywords. So at the start of the week, I can do the keyword research. I still do that by hand because I do think that strategy is the most important part. But once I have the keywords for what we're targeting, I can track to make sure that it's doing everything as it should, pulling out the top 5 URLs, pulling out the URLs individually that are ranking first, second, and third, scraping those, analyzing them, finding content gaps, doing the research, building the internal link report, which you'll see here. We have the podcast that's most relevant along with a quote so that we know an actual conversation is being ingested and guiding the content outputs, the recommended blog posts, the recommended case studies, and the gated asset that we have, the benchmarks report, to guide people there, depending on any of the research that we found that's proprietary to us. Once it creates the brief, it gets handed off to that other workflow, just like a human would hand it off to another. We get this rich text post that comes back with those relevant links already linked in, the title, the meta description, and the URL slug so that we can send it directly over to our CMS. Now, one tip is that we never copy, paste, publish. We have a human in the loop who picks up at this point And that human in the loop is able to tell me, hey, I keep having to edit this, or I keep finding that it's coming out in sentence case when really we do title case, which we don't. I can then go back and edit the right workflow. But as you can see, in this one workflow here, we actually have a total of 5 workflows. We have the campaign brief editor, we have the internal link finder, we have the blog post writer, which generates an FAQ section and then also generates an editing post. And in this way, we've built a process in just about an hour or two that allows us to scale content not just faster, but at the same quality we would get of a human writer, because we have a human in the loop at the end to polish, because we have a human in the loop at the start for strategy, choosing the right keywords to go after. But we don't have to wait anymore for all of the handoffs between campaign brief creator, blog post writer, editor, back to the blog post writer, back to the editor. And in this way, we can multi-thread these workflows together so that we can build an even better process with an understanding of our internal documents. Now, in the next video, I'm going to talk about how we built this pre-process workflow, how we structured our tables to serve as a mini brand brain, and that way we can add all of our relevant content anywhere across the sales process, across the marketing process, across the customer success team. Anything that we need can be stored in this library of tables so that we can get people the content that they need to do their job more efficiently.